struck me in your conversation, Jackie's conversation about natural methods versus hormonal methods is the one thing that really is necessary in a way for the natural methods to work is that you have a relationship with a person and you're working it together. It doesn't help one bit for casual sex.
Right, no. Yeah, I think there was a Cosmopolitan, I think, article one time talking about the different, contraception methods for women, and they did mention natural methods, but they said, but in order to use those, you have to have a cooperative partner. And that's kind of a negative to those methods is, not everybody has a cooperative partner, so they might not work for you if you don't have that.
And as we've had, last year we had Sue Ellen Browder speak at our conference, and she wrote for Cosmo, and she kind of did a tell-all about the fact that when she was writing for Cosmo, they basically invented the Cosmo girl. They invented this character, this persona, who was Sex and the Single Girl. She was having lots of fun, lots of sex, but she wasn't real. They were literally inventing these people with these quotations. And the reason they were doing it was to sell the products, to sell the expensive perfumes and the vacations and all of these things that were advertising in Cosmo magazine, just by coincidence. So how are we doing with getting Father Sebastian?
Right now the connection's dropping in and out.
Oh, no, that's too bad. Do we have any questions? Are we accumulating questions? We could go ahead and start with, if we got a question for these other panelists, we could start with that while we're waiting for Father Sebastian.
How do you recommend introducing natural methods to people who are perfectly happy with whatever hormonal method they're using?
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess a lot of the way Natural Womanhood does it, and I guess, and even the natural method I teach, Creighton, talks about, it starts from the science basis, and kind of talks about the effects on our body and the long-term harm that can maybe be caused. I mean, you might not see right away, but the long-term risks of cancer that rise and things like that. So just kind of explaining that these artificial things you're putting into your body, I mean, you wouldn't buy, you try to buy organic meat and organic fruit, but then you're okay putting these hormones into your body every day. Just on the basis of healthcare and science might not be the best choice for you.
So it looks like we have Father Sebastian Walsh on the screen on the line. Father Sebastian,
Yeah.
Could you hear us okay?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Well, thank you so
Great.
much. Can we have a round of applause for Father Sebastian's talk?
Thank you.
So thank you for joining us from Orange County, California, and I'm happy to see you again. And that was a great talk. And this is Aaron Brewer and Jackie Aguilar. Can you see us on the stage, Father? Or are you seeing the audience?
I can see kind of the group of people there. Oh, now I see you on the stage there. Yeah, I can see you there on the stage now.
Francis. Okay. All right. So, Father Mark, what questions do you have for us?
We have a question for Jacqueline.
All right.
For women that experience the negative side effects of hormonal birth control, are there or have there been any class action suits?
I'm not very familiar with them. I've seen them for things more like IUDs or the NuvaRing or things where, things that have been discontinued because they've caused so much harm to women that they no longer are on the market. So I think maybe for those things, I know, individuals too have also tried it because there's been several parents that have found Natural Womanhood's website on the internet, and they lost their daughter to whatever method of birth control she was using. She had a stroke or a blood clot, and she just dropped dead in her 20s, and they're just heartbroken, and they're trying to find answers, and so they'll reach out to us, but they don't really get acknowledged by any kind of health association or the pharmaceuticals that cause that problem to begin with.
What will often happen is that the pharmaceutical company will offer them a settlement, but it will have a gag order attached to it. And so the only time you ever hear about it is when the parents refuse the money and say, we're going to keep talking about it. I have a question. Do we have a question for Father Sebastian, Father Mark? Because I have one for him if you don't.
No, I got another one for Jacqueline.
Well, I'm going to ask a question for Father Sebastian then in that case, because we want to make sure we get him involved here. So, Father, you talked about our natural natural inclinations, and you talked about the things that are good for us, such as eating and drinking and sleeping and reproducing. It seems like these inclinations are not really all of the same sort. So if you literally don't eat or drink, you're going to die.
Yes.
But not every single person needs to be reproducing, and certainly we're not all reproducing all the time. So there's
Yes.
something a little bit different about that one. So I wondered if you could comment on that.
Sure, absolutely. If you go back to, I think in my talk I mentioned this, the definition of a natural inclination is the tendency a natural thing has for the activities necessary for the being or the well-being of that nature, okay? And then even if I look at the being of a nature, there are certain things that if you stop doing them, you'll die right away. You know, breathing would be the primary example. If you stop breathing after a few minutes, your nature will cease to be. If you stop drinking after a few days, you know, a week or two, you'll die. If you stop eating after a couple months or something, you'll die. Huh? So those things are all going to prevent your nature from existing as an individual. Okay, and some more quickly, some less quickly. And nevertheless, even with regard to that, we find that there are people who lose their conscious desire, for example, for eating. Some people, because of some sickness or trauma or whatever, they might lose their desire even to eat, which is astounding, but that happens, and you still have to continue eating. Well, what about the natural inclination to reproduce? Certainly, that also is necessary for the continued existence of our nature, not of the individual. The individual can exist, you know, for a full lifetime without ever reproducing. But the nature, human nature, won't continue. If all of us stopped reproducing right now, within 100 and something years, human nature would cease to exist. So it's just a longer time period. But I will point this out. While in some sense, then it's more obviously natural to eat and to drink and to breathe than to reproduce, nevertheless, the one thing that's common to all living things is reproduction.
Yes.
And it's so common that it's basically even if you're a card-carrying Darwinist, you see everything else in your nature is kind of ordered to make that happen correctly. And so it's very fundamental. And the word nature, it comes from a Latin word naturus. It means to be born. So what could be more natural than the thing that nature is named after, namely birth? So in some sense, if I'm looking more broadly at the continuation of the species as a whole, the continuation of the nature as such, there's nothing more natural than reproduction, even if in the case of the individual, it's more obvious that he's going to cease to exist if he stops doing these other activities.
Do you have another question, Father? Go ahead.
I've got a couple questions for Jacqueline, but also a question here for you, Father.
Sure.
Do you have any comments about overindulging good natural inclinations?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, well, we Catholics and Christians in general believe in something called original sin. That means that we have a tendency to go to excess. Even Aristotle recognized the tendency to go to excess. He didn't know exactly its cause. But in any case, that's true. There are desires for which we have a tendency, an inborn tendency to kind of go beyond. I mean, the obvious cases are eating and drinking with regard to gluttony, for example, and also misusing the reproductive power or something like that. Now, I point out that human beings are rational animals. So for us, it's natural for us to do eating and drinking and reproducing in a reasonable way, okay? It's not rational for us, for example, to go to the bathroom on our neighbor's lawn. That's fine for a German Shepherd, but for human beings, we have to do things in a reasonable way. I can't, for example, it's not a reasonable thing to be eating a hamburger while I'm trying to talk to all of you right now. And in the same way with regard to reproduction. So what we do find is, even though for the most part, people have excessive inclinations, it would be a little bit like if everyone or most people were born with some kind of sickness or, you know, a problem with their eyes or something like that. We would know what is the right thing to do, even if the majority of people didn't feel emotionally inclined to do it. Those natural inclinations are deeper than conscious inclinations. So we know what's actually natural for us is not eating and drinking as much as we feel like it, or reproducing or doing a reproductive act as much as we feel like it, but rather in a way that's going to maximize the good being or the good state of the nature. So that means eating and drinking for your health, right? And reproducing in a way that's good for the upbringing of the children so they can have the most beneficial upbringing and so forth.
The fruit of self-control.
Temperance.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you, Father. This is for Jacqueline. Why is natural family planning better than using condoms?
So I think that the main difference is that if my husband and I or other people that use natural methods, I'm sure some women out here will got my back. If we want to prevent pregnancy, we have to use virtue. We have to use self-control. And we have to put aside our personal desires for, for the betterment of our family or for our current children or whatever, if it's not the right time for another baby. If you use a condom, you don't have to avoid, those, you don't have to put aside your desires ever. You can just indulge them if you want to. I guess.
Right, very good.
Right. So you have maybe that a little bit lack of that ability to build virtue that you would have if you were using a natural method solely.
Aaron, this one's for you. We've got a couple coming in for you. And let me just mention, online, all around the world, people are making comments about your presentation.
I thought you were going to say there's a video on the Ruth Institute that's really good.
There is
no,
an
no.
interview with Father Sebastian Walsh on the Dr. J Show. Okay, I'm just going to say. There are two videos with Aaron Brewer on the.
Making wonderful, wonderful comments. One of the comments was, I just want to give Aaron a hug.
Aw.
Virtual hug.
Virtual
hugs
hug.
for
yeah.
Aaron.
Well, whoever said that, thank you. And if I ever meet in person, I would love a hug.
Obviously, it was very powerful. Which is more effective for the family and patient who has gender dysphoria? Counseling the family or counseling the patient?
I think both are really important. Generally speaking, I would suggest that children who develop gender dysphoria have some underlying issues going on in the family as well. For example, in my situation, the reason that I didn't immediately get counseling is because my parents were drug users and hated the police. Sound familiar? All cops are bad. They wouldn't call the police when I came home after the assault, so I didn't get the help I needed. So that's a family that needs help, but I was also a child who needed help. So I really think it's important to have both family therapy as well as therapy for the child. However, in light of what's happening now with the therapy bans, I would suggest that maybe neither is beneficial if you can't find a therapist who understands what gender dysphoria is and the fact that there are underlying causes for it. So maybe finding pastoral care or some other kind of support system. And again, all the research shows that children, if they're left to just naturally progress through puberty with love and support, will overcome these difficult feelings during puberty. Puberty is actually the cure in many cases for gender dysphoria.
You mentioned pastoral care, and of course this would apply to therapists as well. One should exercise extreme caution in choosing a therapist or even a pastor to speak with. Do you have any comments about that?
Well, yeah, actually the reason I got involved in this in the first place, I honestly never thought I would be talking publicly about what happened to me as a child. I never thought I'd be even involved in this issue. I got involved because Equality Utah was trying to ban what they called conversion therapy, and we had some discussion about how disingenuous that term is. Prior to that, I'd actually been a hardcore liberal. I volunteered for Planned Parenthood. I was a Bernie Sanders delegate in 2016. But I got a letter from Equality Utah, and they were talking about the therapy ban they wanted to enact, and I realized it was going to ban the very therapy that helped me as a child, that the school psychologist helped provide and other mental health providers gave to me. And so I felt really called to speak out against that ban. and it really raised my awareness about the fact that you have to be incredibly careful about finding therapists, because in many states they are prohibited from exploring those underlying causes, and the only treatment path available is affirmation, which often means medicalizing these children. So I encourage people to be incredibly careful, and actually there are a fair number of therapists who are letting their license lapse so that they can become what's called a life coach instead, and they're not under the same prohibitions about therapy. They don't have to risk prosecution and losing their license. However, the United Nations there's somebody in the UN who's Sharon will know this more than I do, but the Special Rapporteur on SOGI is introducing the idea that we should have an international ban on conversion therapy, and they're defining conversion therapy as anybody who doesn't affirm a child's gender identity, including teachers, parents, crossing guards, just anybody who doesn't affirm it would be guilty of conversion therapy. So they're defining it so incredibly broadly that basically anybody who doesn't affirm a child would be guilty of conversion therapy. So that's another reason we have to really fight back. Instead of calling it conversion therapy, I always call it a therapy ban. These are people who believe in choice, they claim, and yet they're prohibiting children from getting the help that they need to resolve their underlying issues.
So
They believe in
instead of
choice, but they're
defending the body, we have whole professions that are attacking the body. And we'll take one last question, and then we'll have to stop. Go ahead. I know.
Aaron. Well, maybe the other. Well, okay. Your feelings of being in the wrong body were caused by a grave evil committed against you. Were you able to forgive the person who hurt you? And do you think forgiveness is a key need in the LGBTQIA++ community?
I might cry. It has taken a long time for me to forgive. And I recently became a Christian, and up until then I had not forgiven. I had been very angry at God for allowing that to happen to me, and very angry at the two men who did this to me, and angry at my parents for not providing me the support that I needed. I did recently become Christian, and God just blessed me with the ability to understand that those men who hurt me are damaged too. And whatever happened to them is something that God is going to have to work with. But I have been able to open my heart and forgive them, and that has provided me with just so much lightening of my spirit, I would say, and a compassion for the people who are in this movement. And that's something that I want to just reiterate, that I did not really know what love was until I was around Christians, and suddenly I felt God's love reflected to me, and that was so powerful. And many of these kids never know that. They never feel that love. They don't know what it even means to be loved. So if we can reflect that love to them, if we can see what they're doing as not something, that's inherently wrong with them, but a reflection of the sin that is within the world, and love them, then I feel like we have a chance of bringing them over and allowing them to have that freedom that we all find when we realize that God loves us.
Father, I think this is a very powerful moment on which to conclude this session, but I am going to ask Father Walsh if you would give us your blessing from afar, Father.
Yes, of course. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
Intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary and your holy guardian angels and patron saints, may the blessing of Almighty God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit come down upon you and remain with you forever. Amen.
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 Amen. Thank you, everyone. We got a 15-minute break coming up for dinner.